Way out west, there was this fella I want to tell you about. Fella by the name of Jeff Lebowski.
I am not Mr. Lebowski. You're Mr. Lebowski. I'm the dude. So that's what you call me. You know, that or his dudeness or duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing. Dios mío, man.
Smokey, this is not Nam, this is bowling. There are rules.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Wilder Ride Patreon show, season number 2. Now this is for all of our patrons, and we appreciate you guys out there because without you, we would be incurring costs every month that we would not be able to sustain. So thank you for helping to keep the show alive and afloat. I'm Alan Sanders.
And I'm Walt Murray.
And Walt, 2 seasons now under our belt, regular season, and now starting our second Patreon season.
Yeah, I really can't believe we're moving along this fast. And we're still interested, and apparently the fans are too.
We love it. And we're doing something a little different. Last season, we did 2 Patreon shows to wrap up. We had a fall show with the Halloween theme with Poltergeist, and then we did a Christmas show with Christmas Vacation. But we did it just you and me. We said, let's do something a little different this time. Let's maybe invite people to join us with our Patreon show.
Yes, and I think this is going to be good. Susan, of course, is a huge fan of this movie.
I like the movie. I'm not a fan.
That's Susan Delmonico. Now, you've heard her on both seasons 1 and 2 of The Wilder Ride, commenting on Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles. So thanks for being part of this.
Oh, no problem. I was kind of forced into it, but all right. You are welcome.
Well, and Brad was really the impetus for us doing this movie. So he brought that up when he was a guest.
He's the true
last season.
Big Lebowski genius.
Yes. Let's go to attorney Brad Stevens. Hello, how are you, sir?
Hello, sir. I've said this in the testing. I said I've seen this movie 483 times. That probably is not far off.
You may have it memorized.
I could. You can mute it. You can mute the Big Lebowski, Star Wars, all of them that are good.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Some of the, yeah.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
I always have to put that.
Right. Tombstone and a few others. You could mute them, and I could quote them from beginning to end. This is one of them.
Nothing wrong with Tombstone either. That might be one we have to consider somewhere down the line.
That one's just too good. I don't care at what point it's on when it's on TV. I just have to watch it.
I'm the same way. I actually have the shot of them walking to the OK Corral hanging in my office.
It's a wonderful movie.
It's a great movie.
I do like that movie.
Yeah, well, here we go. And there might be coming up, maybe not this season, maybe next season, but we'll know. We can bring some voices in for another show. If you haven't been able to figure it out, folks, The Big Lebowski is our topic today. And it's one of those movies that, well, we talked about this before on the radio show. We sometimes sit in with BK on the air, another voice who's joined us in our regular seasons, about how typical movies today are not quotable. There are not many quotable movies in, let's say, the last 10, 15 years. And by that I mean, we grew up, we could quote any of 100 different movies growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, even into the late 80s and early 90s. But then all of a sudden the 2000s hit, it felt like there weren't many quotable movies. Like this is one of them. This movie, you could just start quoting pieces of it and people will start adding into it.
Well, this is one that my brother will just text me a quote out of this movie. And we'll pick up and go right through that scene, just going back and forth on text. And it is that kind of quotable movie.
It is. And that's one of the reasons I took off and got a cult following is because of the quotes. Because it didn't do that well at the box office at all.
The reviews were horrible to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
And it was panned, and it is. That's when something becomes a cult classic is when you have a crappy reviews, but everyone just loves it anyway, and it keeps building and building and building.
I think people didn't know what they were watching. I didn't think they knew what the Coen brothers were trying to do here, and they were going way back to those noir novels like the Chandler novels that became sort of the staples of the 40s of this sort of Sam Spade sort of. There's this bigger, wider thing that the detective's hired to only find one thing, and then all of a sudden it spins into like this ginormous conspiracy with all these layers and plot levels, and that's the kind of writing that they were trying to emulate, only instead of making it a serious sort of Sam Spade, they were like, what happens if this was just kind of a stoner who was just trying to get his rug back and happened to stumble across all this stuff?
And it's the perfect storm of actors and actresses in it. To be honest with you, they couldn't have cast it any better. There's never been a time where I'm like, so and so could have played that part better. No, not at all. And the movie makes a lot of no sense.
Right. And I was going to
not
ask you about
supposed to.
that, Brad, because when you mentioned it a while back, I had not watched it in a long, long time, even though, it is one of those that so much of my brain space is taken up by quotes in this movie. I had not watched it in quite a while, and I was like, why haven't I watched it in a while? What is it about this movie that it captivates you with it so much?
I'll be honest, it's the movie that I can tell you, no matter what mood I'm in, if I'm in a happy or sad mood, or I'm looking for something to do and just bored, that's the movie I always turn to. And I start laughing from the beginning of the movie, right off the bat, when he writes a check for, what is it, 72 cents?
Yeah, right.
At Ralph's. The George Bush is in the background talking about the Kuwait invasion. This aggression will not stand. That comes back in the movie later on.
Right.
He quotes it himself. And I just, it's my go-to movie for
Your comfort movie.
It is. I mean, I never get tired of watching it, and I always find something new, even now.
I find myself, as we do with comedies that we kind of have memorized, we did it when we did season 2 of Blazing Saddles, you start giggling as the joke's coming. You already know what's coming. And then the delivery, it feels fresh. Every time John Goodman turns around and goes, shut the up, Donnie. It's like, poor Steve
and I actually meant to count how many times he said that in the movie.
It's all the time.
They are so brutal to Donnie. It is
they are
awesome.
Oh, I think that movie says the F-bomb maybe the 4th most in history.
Right.
I don't know what it is. I think it's like 283 times in the movie.
Well, that was one of the reviewers who, and it's interesting, Susan, you mentioned this. The reviews at the time were terrible. A lot of those reviewers now have come back and said, you know what? I gave it like a 3 at the time. I give it an 8 now.
They didn't know what they were watching.
They didn't know what they were watching, and nobody really understood the staying power that the movie was going to have. And I think that for me is one of the reasons that I keep kind of going back to it too, is there are just certain elements to it that that kind of grab me at different points. But one of the funniest scenes in the movie to me that I'll start laughing 5 minutes before it even happens is when he's driving down the road and he's smoking that joint. And he tries to flick it out the window, and it hits the window and lands back in his lap. And then he crashes into the garbage can.
He pours the coffee in his lap and ends up crashing into the dumpster.
Right. Yeah.
And isn't he like banging on the hood? Like,
That's
to Creedence Clearwater Revival?
That's the gif I sent to y'all
Yes,
earlier.
you did.
Banging on the, and he's
like,
listening to Looking Out My Back Door.
Right.
Because
the little freaking roach drops in his
he
lap.
was really relaxed because he had just been to the doctor and they were seeing if he was
Gonna be
able to father a child. So so he was all happy, and then he dropped that weed in his lap on fire, and that was it. That was a great part because he smacked that dumpster, and that car was just a disaster.
And he blocks the entire road, and I don't know why.
That's when he finds the homework.
That's right. That's right.
The kid.
And he can't really focus on it because he's so stoned.
How much has happened to that car during the movie? I mean,
And it was already a disaster to start with.
Oh yeah, he got stolen or whatever,
Yeah.
and then they found it, and they said a vagrant had used it for a bathroom.
And then he just drives off in it.
It gets shot with an Uzi when Goodman tries to do the whole bailing out of the car.
And then it gets lit on fire in the
Gets lit
end
on
by
fire.
Uli Kunkel and the Nihilists.
that Torino.
That's when he walks out of the bowling alley and goes, well, they finally did it. They killed my effing car.
Well, and the car is really, it's like its own character in the movie. So, you almost follow the plot of the movie as what's happening to the car.
Yeah,
So-
no, that's an interesting way to look at it. You're right, because it comes off right on the beginning, because he pulls up at the bowling alley and you're like, oh God, it's just this ratty car, but it's kind of a not to get academic about this, but it's kind of a microcosm of him. He's a slacker.
Oh yeah,
just,
absolutely.
and had to take care of himself.
Yeah.
It looks like hell most of the time. And in fact, at the beginning when the Sam Elliott voice, which is a great addition to this
best
whole movie,
part of the movie,
Sam
I
Elliott's
think.
awesome.
he said he was laziest in Los Angeles County, which put him high in the running for laziest worldwide. See, look at that ratty car, and it's yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Something funny about the Coen brothers talked about wanting to get Sam Elliott to play this sort of narrator, because there is a bit of a Western motif behind it. Obviously, it starts off with
Absolutely.
the tumbling tumbleweeds, Sons of the Pioneers, which, by the way, they've been replaced now. Obviously, all the original members are dead, and they've got new members, and they constantly come through the booth here in Cartersville, Georgia, and they're going to be, I think, doing another concert this fall. But they said, we loved Sam Elliott because we never saw his mouth. We could have replaced whatever dialogue we wanted. It didn't matter what take we used because we didn't know what he was saying anyway. We would always get this, and then we could just add whatever we wanted. But Sam Elliott kept saying, boys, I'm not sure what I'm saying here. Am I doing this right? He's like, Sam, you're fine. You're doing it great. But he had no clue what he was doing in the movie.
I don't think that guy ages.
No,
He
been the
has
same
this
age
sex
forever.
appeal, and I can say this, you guys can't, or I hope
Well, we
not.
could.
I don't know.
But man,
He is Sam Elliott.
There is something about that guy, and it doesn't matter how old he gets. Whew.
Yeah, well, he's always Wade Garrett to me from Roadhouse.
I was about to say that I still think is his best part.
Oh yeah,
He
I
was
loved it.
awesome in that movie.
Yeah, his voice. I don't know. They call it a California drawl, but I didn't really know Californians had a drawl.
No.
I've heard. I don't know where he got his accent from, but he's from California.
Yeah, it's so deep
don't
and
tell me that.
gravelly.
You know, there are
he's from
rednecks
California.
everywhere.
Yeah, I guess so.
He's not from L.A.
No, but that's a good part because that you're right. The tumbleweed blows across the desert, and then all of a sudden it's L.A.
Mm-hmm.
And that's him talking in the background. The one part about Sam Elliott that made me laugh about it was he's sitting in the bowling alley for the most part, and he orders a sarsaparilla at the end of the movie, and the bowling alley has sarsaparilla.
I thought the same thing, and I didn't catch that until I watched it this time, and I don't know why I caught that.
Yeah, I mean, when was the last time you saw a sarsaparilla anywhere?
Well,
Ever?
I mean, you know what a sarsaparilla is, right?
Not really.
It's root beer.
Oh yeah.
So if you go now, they've got these little specialty aisles at like the grocery store where like get the soda with actual cane sugar again, not the fake stuff.
Yeah.
And there's I forgot who makes it, but they do the cream soda. They do
Is it Doc Brown?
the orange soda, and yeah, maybe, and then they do sarsaparilla, which is root beer.
I didn't know that. You learn something new every
It
day.
takes the mystery away all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Well, that
No,
explains why in the
so-
Bugs Bunny cartoons when we were growing up and they'd order a sarsaparilla, they weren't getting a beer, they were just getting a root beer.
Yeah, that's I always thought it was like I didn't know what sarsaparilla was. I was like, this bowling alley randomly had sarsaparilla.
But nobody calls it that. That's the
Yeah.
thing. That's the funny part.
Yeah, Sioux
So-
City sarsaparilla, which is actually a real sarsaparilla. I found out.
Oh, really?
So yes,
That actually may be the maker, Sioux City.
yeah,
Might be.
That's it. That's it.
Might be.
SIOUX, spelled like
Yeah.
Sioux City, Iowa, right?
that's
Sioux
right.
City?
So let me ask you about his character. You know, he's
Which character? The dude?
no, I'm sorry.
The narrator.
The narrator. Is he a real person, or is he kind of a ghost of a person? What is he in this movie? Because he almost seems like he's kind of above everything,
Yeah.
and he's kind of there giving advice, and
Well, he breaks the wall.
He
He talks
does.
to
Yes.
us.
Yeah.
But then he interacts with the dude at the end.
Mhm.
yeah. So I was
So-
trying to figure out how they envisioned him, because I've always seen him as a little bit of an outside the box of what's going on in the movie.
It's the
kind of
Coen
character.
brothers. There are no rules.
Yeah.
That is true.
I feel like he's a person. I think I would go again. I would say he would be like a ghost or like a higher power or whatever you want to call it until he engages the dude in the end sitting at the bar. And I was like, okay, so he's not.
I think he's there, but he serves as the purpose. If you go back to the Greek stories and Shakespeare's day of the narrator that helps bridge to the audience what they're about to see, and yet they're still part of the show.
Right. He's almost like the guardian angel.
I mean, his
kind
role
of
in this is
thing.
called the stranger. It's just the stranger, the guy that showed up at this bowling alley. Like everybody knows everybody at this bowling alley. This guy just shows
Yeah, I was
up.
trying
Nobody
to remember
knows
if he
who
had
he
a
is.
name. I guess he doesn't.
It's called
the stranger.
in the credits. He's listed as the stranger.
And he really doesn't. I mean, I guess you could call him the narrator, but there's a large gap in the movie where you don't hear anything out of him.
Yep.
It's just the movie's going.
Well, if like in Shakespeare's day, what they would do is the person quote that narrator would come out and say, "Here's what you're about to see," and then at the very end it says, "In case you missed it, here's what you just saw."
Yeah, and that's kind of the role he plays in it
Yeah.
until the end. Yeah, that's a good analogy, Alan. I guess that's where the Coen brothers got it. It had to be. Because you ever been to the Shakespeare, the plays down in Atlanta? That's
tavern.
exactly like that's what they do.
Yeah,
Every single
well,
time.
depending on the show, if the show doesn't have a narrator in it, they won't add one. It's just, but Shakespeare did that often for his audience to kind of just say, "Hey, y'all, here's what we're about to see.
Right.
Just pay attention."
And at the Shakespeare Tavern, the narrator takes liberties if you come back to your seat from the bathroom late before the show starts. Then they ad lib right there in front of everyone. Not that that's
she would know
happened to
anything
me
about
at
that.
all. But I do know that they do that.
You don't know from personal experience.
Right.
Okay.
A
very
friend of
good.
mine.
Right.
So I've been
Other
told.
people who are not me.
A little Billy Madison right there. You're going.
Well, what I love, you talked about how the car is sort of emblematic of the dude,
Yeah.
but the tumbleweed is really the dude, just sort of blowing through this story. Like, he
Yeah.
doesn't really have a whole lot of control. Everything else, just like the wind, pushes the tumbleweed. He just is kind of like the winds of whatever's happening day in and day out. He's just sitting there like the tumbleweed. He had no motivation to move. It's the things around him that push him to do things.
That's a good, another great analogy there, Alan. I can tell you, you almost kind of, not really in reality, but you almost kind of envy the dude because you kind of want to be like a guy who really just doesn't not care.
Right.
And I mean, the one of the part that lets me know that he does not care, and it makes me laugh the most, is when he's laying on the ground or laying on that rug that he got from the Big Lebowski.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's listening to a tape, and one side of it says Bob. Okay, side one is Bob, which is Bob Dylan, obviously.
Right.
And the side number two was the 1987 semifinal tournament, and it's just bowling. It's just balls hitting pins. You know, he's right, and that's what he's listening to when Maude shows up with her crew and knocks him out cold.
Yeah.
And that's when Bob Dylan actually plays "The Man in Me" because he's knocked out cold.
Right.
And he's in some dream sequence. I was like, I wish I could be that.
Now, did they use that
Carefree.
both times? Because I know that's what they use for the opening credits, the Bob Dylan song. Just
Right, the Man in Me.
Yeah.
And they do that too. When he gets punched in the face, it immediately comes on.
So yeah, so it brings back the opening theme to when
Right.
he's having his sort of trippy dream. This is how the dude dreams. Like this is a portrait of his his unconscious.
Yeah, and it starts like, "The man in me will do nearly any task." You know, that's it. Bob,
And that's maybe one of two Bob Dylan songs that I can listen to.
I tell you, man, I'm with you, Walt. I'm not the biggest Bob Dylan fan by any stretch. I know his impact on music is big, but you know, it's just not my favorite.
Well, I'm glad he impacted Tom Petty
Yeah,
because I'm a
Yeah.
huge Tom Petty
Love
fan.
Tom Petty.
absolutely.
But if I sit and listen to a Bob Dylan, I can't listen to a Bob Dylan album.
No,
You know, when I have been around some of my other friends who indulge a lot, they're Bob Dylan fans, and so I think there's something about the brain chemistry that.
Well, maybe when you are smoking a doob, it changes what you hear.
Yeah, maybe it makes sense.
So they hear something totally different than the rest
That's
of
the
the
only
world.
explanation I have.
I mean this movie is very much intertwined with the drug culture. So Bob Dylan definitely has a prevalent role. I mean, you think about the other song that's in there that Alan talked about earlier today. I mean, it's about doing drugs. I just dropped in to see what my condition was in. I mean, what do you think that song's about?
Right.
And a lot of people don't realize that's Kenny Rogers.
That is
Yes,
Kenny
it is.
Rogers and First Edition.
Yeah, that's right.
That was
Kenny
before
Rogers.
he went to that whole pop country kind of thing that most of us know the big songs like The Gambler and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was Kenny Rogers singing that
Yeah,
song.
this is Islands in the Stream, gigantic head, Kenny Rogers.
Let me ask you guys a question. At what age were you when you actually started understanding the meaning of a lot of song lyrics?
I'm still figuring out some song lyrics to this day. But no, I think probably when I hit college and started really looking at the lyrics for themselves as a story rather than just singing along mindlessly.
Because I know that with my own kids, I'll see them listening to songs and I'm like, what are you listening to? And like, what is it? Whistle Baby.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And
that
I'm
one.
listening to it. I go,
You and I
"Oh
were
my
horrified
God."
when our like
That's
7 and 8 year olds.
horrifying song. I mean,
And the thing is, it's just kind of like catchy.
Oh, it's very catchy.
You know, for a kid, it's just kind of,
Yeah.
you know,
You know what I'm
bouncing back
talking
and
about?
forth.
Somehow
Do you
dodged
blow
this
my
one.
whistle, baby, whistle, baby.
Let me teach
See,
you how.
my kids
me
are all
teach you how you
listening
just
to their
step up
music
and
with their
Come on
headphones
close
in.
and yeah.
oh yeah, you're like, I'll be like unplugging everything and let everybody out.
You know what's crazy? They didn't have any clue what they were
They
singing.
had
Oh.
no idea. That's the thing. So that's what made me wonder. Like, I used to love the Beatles growing up. It wasn't my generation, but I loved the Beatles. And then I don't know how old I was when I figured out what Lucy in the Sky was.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh, I remember very distinctly when I figured that one out because my dad was talking to a friend of his and on a rant about something and somebody they had just arrested and he was like, and just like that Beatles song about LSD, and I was like,
Lucy in the sky with diamonds. There you go.
And I was like, love me,
Well,
dude.
according to my
And
parents,
then-
though, it's all devil music, so it
Some
doesn't
people,
matter.
some people never catch on. You had Lauren Swelk having an updated version of
that was
One Toke Over the
awesome.
Line.
Oh,
Sweet
God.
That is one of my favorite YouTube
You don't even have
videos.
to wonder there.
But they didn't know what they were
He had
singing.
no idea.
And I remember
He probably still never.
My mom was listening into when we were talking about that song on air, and she's like, "You are ruining Lawrence Swelk. He did not do that." I'm like, "That's the song."
That's the song.
You know, I can tell you that I started thinking about lyrics actually at a very much younger age. And I can tell you the time when I realized I wanted to think about these lyrics. I was getting my braces put in my teeth. And Dr. Acuff, may he rest in peace, was putting them on. And I hear this song playing in the background, and it's just appealing to me. And like, I'm like, I look at Dr. Acuff, and I'm like, hey, what song is that? And he's like, what? And my mouth's like, what? I said, what song is playing? And he goes, that's Pink Floyd. He says, Us and Them. It's from an album called Dark Side of the Moon. I was 13 years old. So I went home and I was like, I know what I want for Christmas. And then my parents bought Dark Side of the Moon for me. And that's,
You have good parents.
Yeah, I do. I have great parents. That's one of the best lyrical albums ever.
Amazing.
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 Among other things. But it was that the lyrics in that all of those songs mean something.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think Pink Floyd helped when you started buying CDs and they would have all the lyrics printed. I got The Wall, a double disc set, because I never had owned The Wall, and I wanted it. And so I read along, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, and I realized, the lyrics meant things, and there was like a story going on, and there was allusions back to other songs, and it was just such a trip, no pun intended. But I really enjoy that. But looking back, things like Madonna's like a Virgin, Touch for the very first time. Mm-hmm. I remember as a kid, I'm just like, singing along with my friends. It was just one big 80s, and all of a sudden you get to that teenage year, and you're like, touched for the very, like, oh my God, that's what she's singing about.
Oh, no,
duh,
this is
like
what
a
they warned me
virgin.
about.
Hello.
Well, the first one, I had gotten in trouble for something. I have no idea what. So I'm sitting quietly in the back seat, hoping Mom doesn't kill me and leave my body somewhere. And American Pie comes on, and I was probably 6 or 7. And since I'm having to sit quietly, I start listening to the song, and I said, "Mom, what is he talking about?" And she was like, "I have no idea." And to this day, I don't think the lyrics to that song mean anything.
Oh, yeah, they
American
do.
Pie.
Yeah.
It's just talking about Buddy Holly's death.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I mean, I knew that
death.
there was some
crash.
references to it, but
Yeah.
like some of the stuff in there makes no sense
No,
whatsoever.
it doesn't. It
So-
doesn't. There's a few songs that are like that. Are supposed to have some kind of huge
Like
underlying
deep
meaning, and
meaning,
I'm like,
yeah.
this is no. I'm done. I don't
Yeah.
like it.
Or, like Cats in the Cradle, the
I know that one.
We had talked about the soundtrack of this movie. I mean, the lyrics and a lot of the songs that are in this movie are really important. But it's looking out my back door at that scene we were talking about earlier. I mean, that song is the lyrics in that are nuts too.
Oh,
Yeah.
they are. Yeah. They
Yeah,
are.
and I really don't know what they mean at all.
According to John Fogerty, he wrote it because his kid was only 3 and loved the Dr. Seuss book about a parade or something, and it had all these like with giant feet and big, huge things, and it was like a Dr. Seuss thing, and so they made up all of these different characters that would be in this parade, and so he kind of wrote lyrics based off of that.
Yeah, because there's a couple of lines in there. It's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, that's a crazy song.
But yeah,
In fact, it's the book is and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street.
yeah,
That's the
okay.
Dr. Seuss book. According to, and I've got the quote here. John Fogerty has said he wrote it for his then 3-year-old son Josh. He also has said that the parade references, giants doing cartwheels, statues wearing high heels, were inspired by the Dr. Seuss book, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Now
That's cool.
it makes sense.
Now it does. Before it made no sense. So.
No.
But, I'm glad we talked ahead of time about going into the music, because I did at least do a little research ahead of time, and there's a great article for folks if they're interested in all of the analysis. The LA Weekly, if you just do a Google search, LA Weekly, the definitive guide to the music of the Big Lebowski, it's fantastic. A different Rolling Stone music writer takes one song and sort of gives us where it falls in the movie, the background of the singer, the background of the song, and then how it has kind of been interpreted over the years.
Well,
so it was a
and we'll
really good
post
article.
that. Let's post that to the listeners group.
That because it's that's always appealed to me. And that's why I sent you guys that message. We have to talk about the soundtrack. Because it's a pivotal part, and at the end, even when he's with like Jackie Treehorn and all that other stuff, like there's always something playing in the background. And the other funny part about the soundtrack or music to me was that the nihilists had their own band called
Yeah.
Autobahn, which and
Right.
I was like, I want a T-shirt with that on there so bad.
Oh, I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Oh, I would love to have that, but I don't know that actor's name. He always plays like these devious, kind of like foreign, evil people that plays Uli Kunkel. I can't remember the guy's name, but heck, he was one of the bad guys in Bad Boys. Yeah, and he always plays like a Russian or a French like terrorist kind of guy.
The guy that played Carl Hungus
Yeah,
from the Treehorn video.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nihilist #1.
Yeah.
That's Peter Stormare.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Peter Storm. I don't know if it's Stormare or Stormare. Stormare.
He's always a bad guy in every movie that he's in. I feel like, and he's got a strange accent. I don't know if he's Irish or if he's German.
Didn't they use him in a bunch of the Volkswagen commercials with when Farfignugan was the big thing?
Yeah,
and that was
I
the
think
big
that
phrase.
Was him. He was
Really?
also in Armageddon. He was the Russian astronaut in
Oh,
Armageddon.
that's
That's
right. On the
right.
first capsule they
Yeah,
had to like
that's
dock
right.
with. Like, I
That's
told you
him.
to touch nothing.
Yeah, right. He always plays.
The ship's blowing up. It's like, what did you touch? I told you touch nothing.
Yeah, that's him.
You know-
Yeah, he's great.
He's also I'm glad you brought him up because he is in one of my favorite current television shows. It's called L.A. to Vegas. Have y'all watched this?
No,
I think it's on Fox, and it's network television has gone so downhill, but this is one of the few exceptions. This is a great show, and he plays a foreign guy on there who's a gambler who flies back and forth from L.A. to Vegas every weekend, and he is fantastic. And it's got to be based on the character in here, but I just put it together that that's who that is.
yeah,
And
Peter Stormare.
He is
Stormare.
awesome.
Yeah, I enjoy anything he's ever been in. I don't know why. There's certain people I enjoy whatever movie. Jeff Bridges is one of them, who's in The Big Lebowski,
Yeah.
and Keanu Reeves is the other one. He could be in anything, and I would enjoy it. I don't
Really?
know why. Yep.
I don't dislike him. Sometimes he makes me just smile in a, oh, bless your heart sort of way.
He's
Bless
Keanu.
your heart.
So
You've come along.
I'm not full circle on.
well, if you were
on
full circle,
Keanu
you'd be
Reeves
back
yet.
to where you were.
Well, that's true. I'm not half circle yet. I have always had a problem with Keanu Reeves, but he's growing on me, and I think some of it's just his personal life and the way he treats people. And
He's a good guy.
he is a good guy.
Yeah.
And did you see recently? I don't remember what they're filming, John Wick 3 or something. And he was on the way to set, and somebody had put a sign in their yard saying, "Hey,"
Saw that
and he
article.
stops and autographs it and takes pictures with all the neighbors, and and then he was on a plane that had to divert and landed somewhere else, so they all rent a van, and it's him and like 5 or 6 other people who he's never met, and they all get in this van and drive on to L.A.
It wasn't
like
because they
4
landed in
hours.
the wrong, or they had to be diverted
They had
to a
to be
different
diverted to a
airport,
different airport.
and he needed to get somewhere, and a
Yeah.
bunch of people needed to get there. And he goes, "Well, tell you what, let's get a van and we'll all go together."
Yeah, so he just
How cool
rents
is
his
that?
van and they all drive.
I think he's a good guy, and he's really, and I like John Wick, but in my mind, embedded is when he played in Much Ado
That's
with
where
some
he-
amazing
Yes.
actors,
Yes,
and
yes,
he
yes.
stood out as so horribly bad.
I don't know. Everything he touches on the movie screen turns to gold. If you haven't
It
noticed,
does.
I mean, it
It
really
does.
does. And Jeff Bridges is the same way. I mean, everything he's in, everybody just
Well, that about does her. Wraps her all up.
Okay, I know what you're saying. Wait a minute, you guys were in the middle of a conversation. Well, we're going to bring part 2 next week. So hopefully you come back because we wanted to make these worthwhile. So there's something coming out once a week for you. We're going to try to do this the rest of the off season. So that way we don't have such big gaps between when the season ended and the next bit of content. So please tell friends, tell family, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, to become a patron at the $10 level, and you get access to all of the existing Patreon content, plus all of the episodes we'll be bringing you of The Big Lebowski and other movies through the remainder of this year. Need to give a big shout out before we wrap up today to the existing patrons at patreon.com/The Wilder Ride. We start off with our first patron who ever joined us, and she gets top billing because she was the first, Tara Bain. Thank you. And then in order of donations, Ross Seymour, thank you, pledging at the $30 a month level. Then Ben 40 Ford, a member of 60 Minutes With, a podcast podcast you should be listening to. Doug Greenberg, a member of the Rocky Minute podcast, also one you should be listening to. Wendy Muller, thank you, longtime friend of the podcast and a friend of all these Movies by Minutes podcasts. Jeff Lieboff, one of the co-hosts on Radio Labyrinth. Thank you, Jeff. Make sure you subscribe to their podcast too. Off the Bounce, the basketball podcast. Robin Griffith, thank you for joining in. Professor Robert E.G. Black, we appreciate you being out there. Melissa Moody, thank you for being out there and for being a longtime supporter. And Rob Smithers. You guys are all fantastic. Hey, if you don't know how it works with Patreon, you can up your donation anytime, you can back it down anytime, but to unlock certain rewards, we have different tiers, and you have to join at the $10 a month to be able to get all of this Patreon content, and we certainly appreciate that because it helps us put on the regular season at no cost to the listening audience, so we appreciate all of your support. So come back next week, same time, same channel, for another installment of our breakdown of the film The Big Lebowski.